Five past 6 on Thursday, May 2nd. Welcome into the Sons of Saturday podcast. We have a really, really special guest for you. Actually, we could even say we have two special guests today. First and foremost, we got Rich Luttenberger joining the podcast. We have our special guest joining us from Charleston, South Carolina. Rich is joining us from Northern New Jersey. And then this is Pat Finn joining the pod from Charlotte, North Carolina. So before we get started, I do want to make an introduction to Rich Luttenberger. If you're familiar with Rich, walk-on baseball player back in the late 80s, early 90s, played baseball for a little bit, and then was a club hockey legend for Virginia Tech, graduated class of 1993. Rich has spent 25 years, or I guess 25 plus years in public education in Northern New Jersey as a teacher, and has spent the last several years writing for Gridiron Heroics. Now he's writing for the Sons of Saturday. He's put out some awesome content, by the way. If you haven't checked out Rich's portfolio, just did a piece on Ken Oxendine that came out earlier this month, and now is on his first podcast with the Sons. But most importantly, Rich is a diehard Hokie and a Hokie dad. So, Rich, it's great to have you on for this special podcast interview. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. I am thrilled to be here. I've been listening to the pod for a long time, and it's great to actually be on it. So thank you for having me on it.
And with this next guest we have here, Rich said, hey, listen, you got this guy? I'd love to be on. Let's do it. And I said, absolutely. Our special guest, Billy Hite, coach for 36 years at Virginia Tech, 33 as the running backs coach, and was at one point the longest tenured assistant in the country. Coach Hite was undefeated as a head coach at Virginia Tech, which we'll talk about a little later on. And he coached some star-studded guys, whether it was Cyrus Lawrence, Kevin Jones, Brandon Orr, Lee Suggs, David Wilson, Chiron Stith, Maurice Williams. The list goes on. One of the all-time great ambassadors of the Virginia Tech football program. So, Coach Hite, welcome to the Sons of Saturday. It's great to have you. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Pat. Thank you very much for having me, and it's great to see Rich again also. And I'm really excited about this tonight, about talking about the Hokies.
It's nothing like it. So,
hey, Coach, we just want to jump in and give a little belated happy birthday. We know you celebrated a birthday last week. Tell us a little bit about your day.
Yeah, it was really a special time. And I heard from at least 150 former football players from Virginia Tech. And it was special to hear from everybody. That's the one thing I'm really proud of, is that my guys that I coached over all those years, we have stayed in touch with one another. And I hear from them, once or twice a month, and it's really great. I felt like a rock star when I left the spring game after seeing so many guys while I was there. And it being an old guy now, they really make me feel good. There's no question about it.
That was a special time seeing you walking into Merriman, right at the door. I was like, oh, shoot, Coach Hite's here. This is going to be awesome. And, Coach, our relationship goes back probably to 2011, 2012, maybe even before that. I think I was in middle school or high school, and we're in the Outer Banks. And, I think you were driving by, you saw my dad, pointed at his T-shirt and yelled, "Go Hokies" out the window. And all of a sudden we're, I was drinking a non-alcoholic drink, but you guys were, sharing a cocktail on the balcony there. And, over the next few years, it was always good to see you at the Outer Banks. So I would say you're a pinnacle of my Virginia Tech fanhood, Coach Hite. So we're really happy to have you.
Well, I appreciate that. And it was great meeting you and your family there in Kerala. And the people I was with were Hokies. Coach Newsom was with me also, and his wife. And we went down there for 4 or 5 years in a row and stayed in that same place with the Ball family. And once their kids got older, that was the problem. They started taking their kids, and then guys like Coach Newsom and I, we were left out. So, but it was great meeting your family there too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we do for every Sons of Saturday episode, Coach, we kick it off with a Hokie haiku. Now, I don't know if you guys were reading haikus in the locker room or on the sidelines, but we got one for you submitted by our friend Pete McGee. He says, running back farmer. The best ones grew on Hite's tree. A Hokie lifer. So I don't know if you like that poem, Coach, but we are hitting you with some Hokie haikus tonight.
Well, I definitely like that. I can tell you right now, I got accused of a lot of things in my career, but one of them was never screwing up good talent. And I really had a lot of good talented backs, and I tell you, they were all very special at different times in my career there, and they offered so much to the game of football. It was unbelievable. Not only being good players, but they were great people also.
So let's talk about your career at Virginia Tech and the Oranges, not the Oranges, the origins at Tech. You came to Tech from Carolina in the late 70s. What brought you to Blacksburg?
Well, I played for Bill Dooley at the University of North Carolina. And then after I graduated, I wanted to be a football coach. And I stayed on at Carolina. I was a part-time coach at that time, but it was full-time responsibilities. I was only getting paid part-time. And then when Coach Dooley decided to come to Virginia Tech, he brought me along with him. And it was my first full-time position. And I tell you, the rest is history from there. The first kid I coached was Cyrus Lawrence, and he's still the all-time leading rusher in Virginia Tech history. And again, what a fantastic football player he was. I learned a lot in coaching him also, and we used to run him 40 or 45 times a game. And that was Bill Dooley's offense, and that's the offense that I grew up in playing at North Carolina. And Cyrus Lawrence, going into his senior year, he ended up having a non-contact ACL injury when we were practicing in the indoor facility. He just planted and cut. And from that time on, I was not going to play one tailback the rest of my career. And I think I cost him a chance to be in the NFL. And I learned a valuable lesson from that. From that time on, I started playing two tailbacks and sometimes three, during the season. And I wasn't going to run a guy to death like I did Cyrus Lawrence. We ran him 40, 45 times a game. And getting hit that many times, something is bound to happen. But it was a real shame with him. Obviously he wasn't even hit when we were in that indoor facility. He just planted and cut and tore his ACL. And I really do believe I cost him a career in the NFL from that standpoint.
Coach, the game has changed so much on the field, as you were just saying, and off the field too. You have today in 2024, the coaching carousel, the transfer portal, NIL, conference realignment, but most of your career at Virginia Tech, being a lifer at Virginia Tech, it was pretty consistent. But, in the beginning, you were there for the changeover between Coach Dooley and Coach Beamer, and you have the Peach Bowl victory, and then all of a sudden you got Coach Beamer coming into town. What was that transition like? I know that you were one of those guys, and I think the only guy that they kept from one staff to the other. But what was it like in that transition period, getting acclimated under Coach Beamer?
We went 9-2 that year and ended up winning the Peach Bowl, but we were all fired. Coach Dooley, they bought his contract out because they didn't want him being the athletic director and head football coach. And here you're 9-2. I have a 1-year-old daughter, Kirsten. I'm at the bowl game. I brought my mother to help babysit. And she told me, she said, I really hate this profession. You guys are 9-2, winning a bowl game, and you're fired. She offered to send me to chef school in New York. I stayed an extra day in Atlanta. And when I got home, within 15 minutes, my phone rang, and it was Coach Beamer. And he asked me if I would meet him the next morning at 9 o'clock in the office. I went in and stayed with him about 30 minutes, and I was hired on as the running back coach at Virginia Tech again. And that's one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. Even though I wanted to be, I love cooking. My mother catered. I learned cooking from her, but obviously the chef school didn't work out for me.
That's quite an amazing story. We also have a couple cool stories from your end, from from coaching. It's a little known fact that there is only one undefeated head coach in Virginia Tech history, football history, and that is you. So tell us about that experience, like when you had to fill in for head coach during Coach Beamer's, his 1 day absence.
Yeah, Coach had an angioplasty done and had a little problem there for the week. I guess we were playing Tulane, and obviously he was not able to attend practice all week long because of the procedure that he had. And I had so much help from the whole coaching staff. It was my first time being in charge of everything, and but again, I was just pinch hitting for a week is what it boiled down to, and obviously we ended up winning the football game, which was great. I probably made a couple bad decisions during the game. Right before the half, I didn't have a timeout left, and we didn't score. And I think Coach Beamer probably thought I was the dumbest coach in America at that point in time. And I know all the fans did. So, but it was a real shame that Coach Beamer had to go through that. But again, it was a great experience for me and a great opportunity to take over. I know in the first practice that Monday, I didn't like the way a drill was going. And I said, we're going to start all over again. We're going to repeat that drill. And the next thing I know, the kids are upset because I made them start the drill over again. They're mad at one another. A fight breaks out. I said, oh, my God, I've lost total control here on the football field on my first day as a head coach. I go to break the fight up, and my finger gets caught in one of the mesh jerseys. I end up breaking my finger on top of it. So the doctor had to come over and put my finger back in after that. And then I learned a valuable lesson then too. I wasn't going to start a drill over again if I didn't like the way it was going. So, but it was a time that we were just starting to, the program was coming back around and we were getting better. And I tell you, our players, they loved one another. They played together. They played hard every down. And it was really easy from that standpoint being the head coach.
That was a 30-13 victory over Tulane in the fall of 1989. And I was fortunate enough to see that game live. I was a freshman at Lane State.
There you go.
Yeah. So moving on. So Coach Beamer saved you from culinary school, but you then in turn saved us, Hokie Nation. So any Hokie worth his gobble knows that you were highly successful as a running backs coach, but there might be a portion of the fan base that does not know the story of how you saved us and kept Frank Beamer from taking the North Carolina job. So could you tell us a little bit about what happened and your role in keeping him with us?
Yeah, I love North Carolina, and I go back there one time a year at least and see my teammates, and but we left North Carolina for a reason, and to come to Virginia Tech, and we were second to basketball all the time, and and I told Coach Beamer that when I sat down with him after he visited North Carolina. I think there were 50 issues that he had talked to North Carolina about. They approved 47 of the 50 issues, he said. And I flat out told him, I said, Coach, that's my alma mater. But I think we have a better job here at the University at Virginia Tech than what we do at the University of North Carolina. And, my big thing was I told him, if you stay here, people are going to lose respect for you. I think that just happened with the basketball coach. The women's basketball coach just left. People were mad at him, and I said they're going to be mad at you. And I said, I'll tell you what, the way you are, and it's great a job that you're doing here, they're going to put a bronze statue of you up after you retire. And sure enough, they did, and it's truly deserving. I was just hoping. When Jim Weaver asked me to make sure I'd get him to that meeting the next day, and he met with the president and the vice president and several of the other administration people, and obviously once he came back from that meeting, he wasn't going to the University of North Carolina, And I think that's the greatest decision that Coach Beamer made in his whole career there also.
Speaking of the state of North Carolina, what was it like where you have Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest, and Duke, and when Tech joins the ACC, how good did it feel to really effectively own that state during your tenure at Virginia Tech?
I loved it, and I really believe that Coach Dooley thought he could get Virginia Tech into the ACC, and obviously it never worked out at that point in time. But I know I really liked it so much because our first game in the ACC, we played Wake Forest, and we played them at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At 6 o'clock that night, I was sitting in my house eating dinner after playing an away game. Normally, when I wouldn't get home until 11 or 12 o'clock at night when we were playing in the Big East at that time. So, I mean, I knew I was going to love the ACC and playing those teams. So, obviously we played them all those years when I was at North Carolina. And it meant so much to me. It really did. And that was the best thing that ever happened to Virginia Tech, was being admitted to the ACC.
So your position group, your running backs, they were known as the Stallions, and you had so much depth. It was the group was called the Stable. So can you tell us about the origins? How did that name come about? How did we get Stallions in a stable for your runners?
It was early in my career, and Derek Carter, who I recruited from DeMatha High School, he was a defensive back for us, came off the field one day as we got finished, and he said, I want to tell you right now, he said, your Stallions looked absolutely unbelievable out there today. And that's when I was first at Virginia Tech. Derek was one of the first ones that I recruited. Tony Page from DeMatha High School, who played 10 years in the NFL. Mike Johnson played 11 years in the NFL from DeMatha High School. But it all started from Derek Carter calling them the Stallions that day. And from then on, that's what we were known as. After Cyrus Lawrence, I had Maurice Williams, I had Eddie Hunter, two great players. Those guys, they would rush, each one of them would rush for 100 yards a game a bunch of times. So, and then, like I said, I played two almost every year after that, or 8 or even 3 at times. And they liked the name, the Stallions. They took a lot of pride in being called the Stallions from that standpoint on. And every year, that's what they were known as, was the Stallions.
I think they still do have a lot of pride. The runners I talked to recently definitely expressed that. Let's talk about 1999 a little bit. It was a special year, obviously. Are there any specific memories or stories that stand out from that season or from that team?
Well, I know one thing: when you have a guy like Michael Vick, you have a chance of winning a lot of football games in every ball game. And again, we had a football team that was both offensively, defensively, and of course special teams that was outstanding. And I do remember that when you're 7-0, then the next week to be 8-0. That team might not have been as good as somebody the week before, but it was so tough to go undefeated and to keep going. And then when you got into the 9th week, it was the same thing. That's the hardest thing that I have ever been involved in my career, is to go, undefeated like that, and then to play in the national championship game. And I remember Frank walking in right before the game in our conference room at the hotel there. And he said, I just got one thing to say. You guys got us into that. Now get us the hell out of it. And let's go out and win this football game. And everybody was so tight after he made that statement. Everybody busted out laughing, and they said, let's go. Let's get on the bus and go get them. And it was a heck of a football game. I guess we were winning 29-28 going into the 4th quarter. And then they had a couple long pass plays after that. They ended up winning the football game. But that's something. To get to the national championship game is something that I'll never forget. I guarantee you.
Yeah, that 99 season and then the 2000 season with Michael Vick, you also had an incredible run of running backs, and then you land the big one. Kevin Jones, the number one prospect in the nation. So tell us a little bit about your recruiting process with him. How did you lure the suburban Philadelphian away from Penn State's background or backdoor? And is it true that they kind of were recruiting Tech? Tell us about that.
It was really unbelievable because he and D'Angelo Hall became great friends by running in track meets. And those two said they were going to go together wherever it was, whether it was going to be Penn State or Virginia Tech. When I went to the home visit at Kevin's house, I told his father about what happened with Cyrus Lawrence. And I told him I wasn't going to run him 40 or 45 times a game. And because I was worried that something like that, if I ran the guy that many times, something would happen. His father liked the idea that I was going to play two tailbacks. And but Joe Paterno at Penn State, he was telling his father, we're going to run him 40 or 45 times a game. And, we're going to feed him the ball. And obviously, it came down to a maiden decision that D'Angelo committed to us. Kevin decided to commit to us, and he was going to share that spot with somebody else, at that position. And I wasn't going to wear him out from running him that many times. I really think that had a lot to do with it. I really do.
And the rest is history.
What a great player he turned out to be now, I'm telling you.
And then speaking of backs, and one of my personal favorites that I've gotten to know over the last few years, David Wilson was a special athlete who was known to do some crazy things, whether it was running up Castle Coliseum or catching rabbits or doing backflips. I want to know the decision not to redshirt David Wilson as a freshman when you had Ryan Williams and Darren Evans in front of him. And then also would love to hear any funny David Wilson stories that, we probably know, but would love to hear it from your vantage point or something that we might not know about David.
Well, he was a special person also. And what a great person and a great player he ended up being. And, there's no way that after I evaluating him in practice, there's no way I could redshirt him. And, he just added so much to the game. And, so we decided to play him, and he returned kickoffs. He was a special teams player on top of it. And, every time he touched the ball, because of his speed and strength and his quickness, he had a chance. Every time he touched the ball, he had a chance to make a big play. And that's why we ended up playing him as a freshman. And there was two other guys playing with him that were really good football players. And the way things started going with the players leaving after 2 or 3 years, that's the other reason why I was going to play him, because I knew he was that good that he could go on to the NFL, after he played there a couple years. So the thing that he did is the Coliseum, the basketball Coliseum, they have those pillars going all the way up to the very top. And one of the kids came to get one of the players, said, David Wilson just climbed to the top of that, ran all the way up and scooted back down. And I called him in. They also got it on their phone and filmed it. And I sat down with him and I said, I'm going to tell you right now, if you ever do that again, you don't have to worry about falling off of that, because I'm going to throw you off the top of it myself. I mean, I was so upset with him about that. It was unbelievable. And David was a character all the time. I mean, he always had a smile on his face. The thing I loved about him is when I used to go by G.W. Danville High School to recruiting, and it's a public school, I would walk into the school and I would see him at the end of the hallway. He had a tie and a shirt on and always wore a jacket, a sport jacket. Now, this is a public school. I went to DeMatha High School. I had to wear a coat and tie every day and didn't like it. But here, he's in a public school, and he wears a coat and tie to school every day. And I thought he was just remarkable from that standpoint, that he would end up doing something like that. And during the press day every year, And I told him everybody wanted him to do his backflips. Well, I didn't want to see him get hurt on doing something like that. So I told him, you can do 8 this time. And that's it. You stop at number 8. I don't want you doing any more than that, because he would go up and down the field doing backflips. So, he was just a treat all the time. And I loved being in the meeting room with him. His personality, he was so much fun all the time to be around. And again, what a great individual he turned out to be.
Coach, let's talk a little bit about Brent Pry. You mentioned earlier some of the similarities of, what you guys used to do and what he's doing now. But there's a funny story about his hiring process he likes to tell. What was it with all those letters? And we know his side. What was going on your side when you kept getting letters from him asking for a job?
That was one of my responsibilities with Coach Beamer, was I hired all our GAs. And you could only have 4 GAs back then. And when he first contacted me, I told him, I said, I'm full. I have all 4 spots filled right now. But I don't mind if you call me, every once in a while to check back in to see where I am. And all of a sudden, my phone started ringing every week. And then I would get a letter from him. And, I said, this went on for about 8 months. And I don't have any spots. And I did tell him. Now, one year I lost all 4 GAs within a week. But he was so persistent that finally I had a position open. And I told Coach Steinspring, who coached him in high school before he came on our staff, I said, I love this kid, Brent Pry. I'm going to hire him on. And sure enough, I ended up bringing him in as a GA. Now, I always put out, I loved my yard work, and I lived at the Blacksburg Country Club, and I did all my yard work. I did the mulching. I put out 48 yards of mulch in my flower beds every year. I always hired my GAs because that's the only way that they could make money, and I paid them, to help me do my yard work. So he comes down, he's working for me. I fed him well. And then I'll go on vacation, and I tell him, I'm gonna let you stay at my house while Ann and I and the kids go on vacation. And so he stays in my house. Well, I get back. I have a hot tub on my deck in the back, and I get back, and I go to get in the hot tub, and I turn it on, and bubbles start coming out. Brent Pry put bubble bath in my hot tub. I had bubbles coming out of that thing for a month. It was the daggest thing I've ever seen. So that's always been a big joke with with everybody about Pry putting bubble bath in a hot tub, because it was nothing but bubbles coming out of it the whole time. So, but Brent, he ended up, he did a great job for us as a young coach like that. You gave him responsibilities, and you could tell right then and there how successful he was going to be once he got, out in the real world and got his first job, and he just progressed from then on everywhere he went. And he is one of the most outstanding individuals that I've ever met the whole time I've been in coaching. And I think it's the smartest thing that Virginia Tech could have ever done in hiring him as the head football coach.
That's quite an endorsement. That is. Pat, before we move on, I'm of the older generation. I'm about Pry's age. And for the older listeners out there, I have to wonder, did Coach not see that Brady Bunch episode when Bobby Brady put the suds in the washer? I can't believe he did that. But let's move on to rapid fire.
Yeah.
No, the retirement. Go ahead.
That bubble bath story is gonna circulate. That's fantastic.
Well,
Coach,
that's what he gets for doing. That's the only stupid thing he's ever done, I can tell you.
Worth the good story, almost 30 years later here. So retirement. I want to hear about retirement. I know you've relocated down to Charleston, South Carolina. I have a couple quick questions on what you like to do down there, but how has retirement been for old Billy over the past decade plus now?
It's really been good. I really have enjoyed it. I will say that I miss the coaching part. The relationships that I have with my players in the meeting room, looking at film, teaching them different things, footwork, all the things that I did as a coach. But I can tell you right now, this transfer portal thing, I don't know that I could coach today because of all that. I'm really glad with the NIL that kids are finally making money. I think they deserve that. I really do. But I think something has to be done to get control of that, because I think it's out of hand right now. And I can't believe that a kid can come in the portal, and go through spring practice. And if he doesn't like where he stands at the end of spring practice, then he can go somewhere else again. And I think they need to do something with, like the NFL. You have to be here for 3 years or whatever. And then if you want to leave and go somewhere else, you can go somewhere else. And like free agency, I guess, in the NFL, they need to figure out something to do from that standpoint, because it's I don't know how teams, and I that's one of the things I was so proud about with Coach Pye. 21 out of the 22 starters are coming back next year,
Yep.
and they didn't get into the portal. I think that says a hell of a lot about Coach Pry and Virginia Tech's football program, and what those kids think of it. So, it's a tough time right now, and I think somebody has to step up and decide and make some changes from that standpoint. But my hair I'd probably lose my hair. It wouldn't just be gray, but if I was still doing it today, I think I would probably lose it all from the transfer portal.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. So we'll move into some rapid fire questions here, Coach. So you'll say the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you a question. All right.
That sounds great.
All right. So first of all, Charleston, South Carolina. Got 3 questions about Charleston.
My kids.
There you go. Favorite restaurant in town.
There's too many of them, and I've been to them all. The Blue Oyster.
Blue Oyster. All right, we'll have to check it out. Favorite activity that you like to do? You wake up in the morning, you're like, all right, what am I going to do today? What's your favorite activity right now?
Going to the fitness center, and I get my 30-minute walk in.
There you go. And then the beach spot. I know there's Isle of Palms. You got Sullivan's Island. You got Folly Beach. Do you have like a favorite beach spot down there?
Folly Beach is 15 minutes from my house, so that's where we spend a lot of time.
That's the place. All right, here's a good one. If you could go to dinner with 4 people, dead or alive, who you going with and where are you eating?
One would be James Brown, who played with me at the Matha. He's a CBS commentator. In fact, I just went to a banquet for him that he was given a special award up in Maryland for all the things he does in the DMV. And he is just an absolutely unbelievable person. He does so much for the DMV community up there, for all the kids. And he's an ordained minister on top of it. And he's one of the most interesting guys I've ever seen. Another guy that I went to school with that I would love to go to dinner with, because we spent a lot of time when I was at Carolina, but is Roy Williams. And I think the world of Roy Williams. I think Coach Pry reminds me a lot of Roy Williams, just the way they are as people. I don't know who else I'd wanted. Those 2 for sure. I'm not sure who else I'd want to go with besides those 2.
There you go. It's going to be little easier on the waitress or the server that night. And then one more food question for you. What's the Blacksburg eating establishment that you miss the most?
Probably the Outback. I went there. Uh, the owner of the Outback there always took care of me. So I eat there probably once every 2 weeks. Great guy, I'm telling you.
There we go. We'll have to pop in. And then Rich has some good rapid fire about some of your Stallions over the years. So Rich,
all right. So Coach, we know you've coached at least 30 guys who went on to the NFL, and 16 of the top 18 running backs in Virginia Tech's all-time rushing yardage list are your guys. So respectfully, we're not even going to go close to asking you to kind of give us a best or anything like that. But can you just first name that comes to mind when you think of vision?
Kevin Jones.
Elusiveness.
David Wilson.
Power.
Ken Oxendine.
Durability.
Dwayne Thomas.
Quickness.
Andre Kendrick.
Breakaway speed.
Von Hebron.
And raw
2
talent.
Super Bowls.
Yeah. Great kick returner for the Broncos.
Yeah.
He and I were freshmen at the same year.
Lee Suggs would be another one there that you could add to that too.
Okay. And the last one, raw talent.
They were all talented.
Raw talent. All right. We'll skip that one. We'll skip that one. All right. Pat, can I ask the next one?
You absolutely can.
All right. Because I remember seeing Coach Gentry in the weight room my freshman year. Who had the better early 90s mustache? Mike Gentry or Bud Foster?
Mike Gentry. No question.
No question.
And I'd be afraid to say Bud Foster because Mike Gentry would beat my rear end if I said it. Mike Gentry is, and I'm going to tell you, people gave us a lot of credit for what we did as coaches, but I'd give it right back to Mike Gentry. If we don't have him, Virginia Tech doesn't do what they did all those years that while he was the strength coach there. That's one guy that deserves all the credit in the world for what he did with that football program. And he turned young men into men. And I mean, he was outstanding, in getting those guys ready for the season and keeping them healthy and strength. Everything that they did during the season, the success that he brought to our program was immeasurable.
So, Coach, we're going to finish this up with some letters from the lunch pail. And these are questions that are submitted from fans on Twitter. So we got a couple more for you, and then we'll let you go. The first one comes from Bob. I might butcher the last name.
Bob G.
Bob G. The story goes that when you were first hired at Tech in 1978, you told your wife not to get to know the town, not to get to know the people, because you guys would be out of there in a few years. But 33 or 36 years later, you retired from Virginia Tech. What did you like most about living in Blacksburg, Virginia?
It was the greatest place in the world. The reason I told her not to get to know anybody, because once I saw all the facilities that we were lacking, I knew it was going to be very, very tough from that standpoint. And I told her, we had just been married a year. I bought our first house. I was so proud of all that. But then the interest rates went up to 18%. And then there was no way I could have moved if I wanted to. And then the longer I stayed, each year got bigger, it got better. And I loved living in the Blacksburg, Virginia. The only time I didn't like it is when we got those, and we had a bunch of it early, we would get snowstorms that were 8, 10, 12, 14 inches. And I guess in the last 10 years, they've hardly even get snow anymore in Blacksburg. So, but obviously that's what I said originally. Don't get to know anybody. And then at one point in time, I guess I was the longest tenured assistant coach in the country. So I ended up, Blacksburg will always be a special place in my heart. There's no question.
It always will be home. This next question comes from Nick Eder. He says, how did Coach determine who to put in the game when he had Lee Suggs and Kevin Jones?
Either one of them I couldn't go wrong putting either one of those guys in at any time during the ball game. And both of them were such great players. Lee Suggs was a special guy. He's another guy, a non-contact injury with an ACL. And he, I hated that for him. He just planted and cut. It was right in front of our bench. And as soon as he went down, I knew exactly what it was. But, he ended up, he was a great football player and a great person also that I really enjoyed being around all the time. But both those guys they were both outstanding. But they had 100-yard games, each one of them, when they were sharing the time in the backfield. So it was a no-brainer for me about who was going to be in the ball game at that point in time.
From Jeff Chastain, he says, you recruited a lot of great backs to Virginia Tech, but who was the one that got away? I guess, was there any recruiting battles that you wish you could have back?
There's one that I didn't take from DeMatha High School, and he was a basketball player at DeMatha also, and he tore his ACL. And you got to help me out being up there, a Northerner. He played for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I guess he's been retired for a few years now. I think he went to Villanova.
Oh, yeah, that was Brian Westbrook.
Bingo, that's who it was. I talked to our team doctor, and our doctors are so good about those type of injuries, and I wish I was recruiting him, and at the last minute I backed off of him. And he would have been one that I should have stayed on and continued to recruit, because he turned out to be a great football player at Villanova and in the NFL. So that would be the one I wish I hadn't backed off on.
Our next question comes from a friend of mine, and I think you might know him. Anthony Lambo asks, he asks, when you moved me to the offensive side of the ball, why didn't you put me at fullback?
All right, my fullbacks were nothing but a pulling guard with their brains knocked out. That's exactly what they were. They were just like a lineman. There's no question about it. And and you had to be tough. I mean, I had guys like Tony Page and Doug Eastlick, Jarrett Ferguson, who's a strength coach at Virginia Tech now. Our fullbacks were just absolutely unbelievable football players. And again, they were the toughest. They would hit you so hard they'd knock the boogers out of your nose. I can tell you that right now. I don't know if Lambo was ever that tough though. But if you wanted to stop Virginia Tech back in those days with all those great tailbacks I had, all you had to do was follow the fullback, because he was going to take you to where the ball was going. And again, I had so many good Phil Bryant that came from DeMatha, and every one of them, and Brian Edmonds, most of them were wrestlers. I don't know what it was with the wrestlers, but I guess they understood body control and all the different things, and that's why they were so good at fullbacks. They had to block guys at a certain angle, or they had to go right down the middle of them. The fullbacks were really unbelievable. Guys like Cullen Hawkins, even guys that were undersized, technique-wise, they all did a great job. So, and I have a special place in my heart for my fullbacks now. And I guarantee you, our tailbacks, not only the offensive linemen, but they talk about those fullbacks all the time because of the great job that they ended up doing.
Lambo also asks, he says, what are the pivotal elements in shaping your running backs into the enduring, reliable, and selfless force that they embodied for decades at Tech?
I told my guys, I used to give them a thing every year that I would tell them, here's the things that I want you to be. And number one, I wanted to treat other people the way they want to be treated. And that's basically what we live by. And that's something that I think was a great carryover for every one of them the whole time that they were there. And I wanted them to. Number one, I wanted them to be good students. I wanted them to graduate. They knew how important it was in my eyes that they had good grades and that they were working towards a degree. And it's not the wins and losses that were as important to me is what these guys have done with their life once they left college and graduated. And as I mentioned, I talked to 150 of them 2 weeks ago. That was my first. What are you doing now? What's your family like? How many children do you have? And what are you doing for a living? And every daggone one of them is very successful with what their life is. And that means more to me than winning and losing a bunch of football games. So they're just great to be around. And I really have enjoyed doing what I did at Virginia Tech for 36 years.
Pat, I think we can go to your father's question.
Perfect. We're gonna wrap things up with Kevin Finn, who shares a birthday. He doesn't share a birthday, but I think he shares a birthday week with you, Coach. I know
he sure does.
Just celebrated the big 6-0 last week, and we had fun celebrating him. He says, Coach, a big thank you for always being so kind when we used to see you at the Outer Banks. You definitely reinforced Patrick's love for VT. Also, back when I was playing soccer for Tech, you were always very, very positive to guys on the team and had a great example on how to treat people. You never changed, and I wanted to thank you for your kindness to me and also to Patrick as a kid and now coming on the podcast with Sons of Saturday. My question to you, when will we see you at the Outer Banks again?
I can tell you right now, I don't know when I'll be there again, but my wife has been invited to go 2 weeks from now. And they're going on a ladies' trip to Kerala to Vicky Ball's place. So they will be there in two more weeks, but I hope to get back down there again. I hope they'll invite me at some point in time.
That's right. I gotta get down there too. I've missed out the last few years as well, so I'll let you know when I'm making it. Maybe we'll make it a reunion of sorts. But Coach, we couldn't appreciate you more for having spent this time with us. Such a blast, and we love you, Coach. So thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast.
Thanks, man, and happy birthday to your dad too.